Welcome to the Ribs and Knits podcast, where we cover everything godly and girly. We're going to be looking at what we should be clothing ourselves in. You have a choice in life. Do you want to clothe yourself in something that brings you joy and comfort? Or do you want to clothe yourself in something that looks kind of good, but gives you a rash in the long run? We get this choice in life, and we're going to be covering which choice to make. Let's do it together. Let's go. Hello guys, and welcome back to the Ribs and Knits podcast. I'm joined by my friends, Amy and Rachel. Hi guys.
Hi.
And we're going to talk about grief, loss, sad. Start us off in the verse, John 14:27. My peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. I remember when my granddad died, I used to find this verse like really upsetting, because it was like, okay, your peace you leave with me, your peace you've given me, I don't feel no peace. I'm actually really upset and I'm distraught. And it did actually make me question whether I believe in all of it. It made me think through these things. But my granddad was a believer, and I basically just was like holding on to his faith in my time of loss. And yeah, I just love us to start off with this. Like, my peace I leave with you. Have you guys experienced peace? And why don't you guys tell us your stories a bit so that people know what you've gone through?
Yeah. Do you want me to start my story?
Go for it.
All right. Got how long? 3 minutes, you said?
No, go for it.
Okay.
Like a lifetime story.
Yeah.
My lifetime story. So I'm Amy. I'm 20. I am from Australia, but I'm also very British in the fact that both my parents used to live here in South London. They actually moved to Australia right before I was born. They had my brother here. I grew up in Australia, in Adelaide. I had a really lovely, wonderful childhood. My mum, she was super kind and funny and very extroverted, very similar to me, very much a people person, someone who makes everyone feel welcomed and loved, and just carried that kind of joy. My dad was very he was very kind as well, but a bit quieter, but definitely one of those people that people feel very much like they can just talk to, and just like he was just one of those, a good solid man he was. So I grew up in Australia with my brother, always had friends round. We had a big house, and it was lovely, and it was, I guess, my parents' dream was them living in Australia. But from a very young age, I very much realised that life isn't always as what we seem it is. My mum got cancer when she was, back in 2010, so I was only 6 at the time. I don't really remember that much from what happened. I remember she was in the hospital, she lost all of her hair from the chemotherapy, she had a massive rash over her body sometimes, and but those are very small kind of memories I have. I think being so young, I was just like, oh, hello, like I just was kind of like, she's sick, but she got better from that round of cancer, and then life kind of went back to normal for a few years. But then in 2012, so I was 8 at the time now, my dad randomly passed away from an aneurysm. So he was at work, and I remember that day so clearly back in 2012, even though it's so weird that I can remember something. Even I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I can remember like that day so clearly. And so basically he was at work and passed away really instantly. And we got a phone call, and Mum went to the hospital, and we didn't know he had passed away straight away, so we just went to a friend's house and thought, Dad's in hospital, and then found out the next day. Mum told me that he had gone to live with the angels, to be with God, and I was like I was completely in shock about that, because as an 8-year-old, I knew that my mum was sick and she got better, but I had never thought that someone that is so close to me could really just die. And so that was hectic. And then, but Mum really, she was such a warrior that she just modelled grief so well to me. Just looking at the life within my dad, and with that was just, I guess, there was still so much joy that came through our household, and so we had so many people around us. But unfortunately, 2 years later after that, in 2014, my mum's cancer came back again. I'm 10 at the time now. Know a bit more about cancer. Have been through things. Yeah. I've already been through a period of like PTSD almost as a kid, where I'm just like couldn't go to school because I was so anxious that like my mum would die and stuff like that. So it's like, oh my gosh, I'm now 10 and my mum's cancer's come back. It's like my worst fear. And so I kind of like, from when I was 10, just kind of like shut off. And just almost became silly. Like, I know I'm naturally silly, but just like in a different kind of way of not processing things. And so she kind of fought for about a year, and, you know, this time without Dad around, so it looked even different. Like, there were so many people coming around all the time and stuff like that. But then in July, I think 2015 was when she told the news to me and my brother that her cancer had spread to her liver, and there was nothing that the doctors could do to save her. So then it was kind of like this weird phase of knowing that she was going to die and seeing her get sicker, you know, her being in a wheelchair, being wheeled around, and her not really being herself. And I mean, there were so many people coming to our house as well, and that was for a 11-year-old at the time now, that was a lot, being like, oh my gosh, that person's seeing, it's the last time they're seeing my mum. That's like and then on the 31st of July was like the last time I saw her. Well, she was, I guess, last time I spoke to her, and we just I was so out of it. She was in the hospital. I was not on my phone, like just wanting to play games, like didn't want to anything to do with what was going on. And I was leaving and I said to her, and she said, oh, Amy, like, come say goodbye to me. And I was like, Mom, it's not goodbye forever. And then she's like, but like tap, 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 which means we had like this thing where we would say tap, 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 which means I love you. And I'd say tap, 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 which means I love you too. And we said that to each other. And I was just kind of thought, like, I knew she was sick, but I didn't think she was going to die, because then the next day was when she actually passed away. And so I kind of got that like moment with her. But that was obviously that was crazy. And then so then she passed away. Me and my brother moved in with a family friend, and I guess since then it's been like the Lord has just been kind, and He has shown me, he's taken it onto his own hands to really parent me and into who I am today. But that to do with grief, that is what I've been through in my life, is some like pretty hectic stuff by the time I was 11. Had
you been a Christian throughout all of that? And had your parents been Christian? My
mum was a Christian, my dad wasn't. So my mum's faith got really strong by the end of her life. And I grew up going to church and going to a Christian school, so I always knew God, always loved God, always had this kind of childlike faith. And Dad he would never oppose it or anything. I have always known God, which is something so special to me. I think that, like, even though I wasn't in like a really Christian household, but I always knew God. And so, but even I was never angry at God when I was young, which is I think that's something that's been really weird to me, is like a lot of people grieve and they get angry. And I think maybe it's the age I was, and now it's like as I'm getting older, like that processing of what's really happened in my life is where I'm like, okay, God, all right, that happened, and this is what I feel now. But I'm almost lucky in the way that I have that genuine relationship where I can get angry at him, but in a way that is like I feel like he's hugging me and I'm squirming around, and so I know I'm not going anywhere with me doing that. So
there's that psalm, isn't it, that talks about you hem me in, and David talks about, like, where can I go from your presence? If I go to the depths, you're there. If I go to the ends of the earth, you're there. Like, I think I've definitely felt that, of like, I can try and run, but I can't really get away from you, God. And sometimes it's annoying, but other times it's so reassuring. I resonate with that sense massively.
What's your story, Rachel?
Yeah, well, I was going to say on one hand similar, but actually I think grief is always completely unique. Even if two people lose the same person, they're losing someone different to them, and two people can lose a mother, but actually their experience, their age, who that person was, it's always so unique. But yeah, I didn't grow up going to church. My parents weren't Christians. My mum actually got told that she couldn't have children, early 20s.
Wow.
Ectopic pregnancy, you'll never have kids. So my mum and my dad kind of got quite good jobs. They settled down in like a 1-bed flat in London, got to their mid-30s, were like, this is our life. And then suddenly my mum got pregnant at like 35, and the doctors were like, how the heck are you pregnant? And she'd prayed, like, she kind of had grown up a Catholic. She wanted to be a nun when she was young, which was funny. Like, I think she liked the gardening and the cooking, but she'd prayed for years to have a baby, and then got pregnant at like 35, had me. She baptized me in the sink at home. It wasn't legit or anything, but I think, well, no, it wasn't the eyes of God, I think.
That's
nice. So I was brought up being told like miracle baby. The doctors were like, miracle baby. So only child. Again, similar story of like my mum got cancer when I was about 12. I remember like hysterectomies, radiotherapy, the weird coffee machine in the radiotherapy place, in this random place, like, and I remember the foamy hot chocolate being so good.
You just remember the random
things that you have to like distract yourself with to not be like, I would concentrate on so much like to do with the room and what was like all these weird things to distract yourself from like what the heck is happening. Again, she got better, and like I remember people would ask me when I was like 12, 13 who your best friend is, and I was like, my mum. Like legit my mum. We were like so close. And that, if anything, gave us like a really special 2 years. She was like, I want to go out of my way to like create memories. We went camping. It was an absolute sham. It was so good. We nearly like got blown away by this 8-man tent we couldn't put up properly. It was like we had like an amazing time, I think, because she was like, you realise how fragile life is sometimes when illness hits. But then it came back just after I wasn't a Christian at that time, and then I became a Christian like a month or 2 before it came back. And they said it was coming back, and my dad was like so optimistic. We were like, chemo, we're going to fight this thing, we're going to win. We were planning family holidays, and like my dad was like such a fighter, so strong, so resilient. So we were like, okay, we're getting better, we're doing this. And I remember like a few moments of having like, I came to faith basically always having believed in God, but then being like, church, meh, Bible, meh, sus, like no thanks. But started going to church with a friend and started to feel like God's presence, and was so fascinated by Jesus. Everything I was reading about him in the Bible was like, wow, this guy, like, oh my gosh. So like gave my life to Jesus, and but was brand new to faith. I remember one time we'd had a youth group, and we someone had preached about Jesus healing the blind, and by that time my mum had gone blind with the cancer. There's all that physical stuff of like the body shutting down. She was 49, and like the body is still. What kind
of cancer did your mum have?
It was cervical. But then she then hysterectomy, radiotherapy, and then it came back, and then they never really told us that metastasized or whatever, that lovely word, awful word. So I don't like her. She was going into like organ failure. Now I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, she was yellow. She was blind. She was like, her whole body was shutting down. But you're also like quite strong. So there's all this like, just some of the stuff you can see is not just the grief of losing someone, and sometimes that can happen dramatically, and there's the shock of it. But then sometimes watching someone slowly go, and realizing the frailty, or living with illness, living with sickness, living with, is like there's just a trauma of of watching it happen slowly in front of you, and you can't do anything. So I remember coming back home after youth and being like, I'm going to pray. It's the first time I ever prayed for anyone out loud, and I was like, I'm going to pray for my mum. I was like, Mum, can I pray for you to be healed? And she was like, yeah. And I just started praying for her to be able to see. It was about 2 weeks later. I remember one morning waking up, and I just heard my dad screaming my mum's name. He was like, Angela, Angela, Angela. And I like lay frozen in bed like, what is going on? And it went quiet. And then again he started screaming, Angela, Angela, Angela. And I was like, and then he started screaming, Rachel, Rachel, Rachel. So I ran in. My mum had like basically passed out, like died.
Wow.
My dad is hitting her heart, like hammering at her body, trying to resuscitate her. And he screams at me, call an ambulance. So I ran, call the ambulance. I'm like waiting outside on the street. It's like, it felt like a Sunday morning. I think it was a Sunday morning, like so quiet on the street. I'm just waiting for the ambulance. I'm like, Jesus, what is going on? Like, what is going on? My dad resuscitated her again, and we went in the ambulance with her. And my mum was like, what happened? And my dad was like, you died on me like a few times. and I just remember her looking up and looking really distant, and I think she'd imagined like dying at home peacefully with her family. And my dad was like, no, not on my watch. Which was like my dad, like complete fighter, like no way. And he didn't know she was, I think she was terminal. She was terminal and she hadn't told us because I think she wanted to just be with us and enjoy it. But yeah, anyway. So then we got to the hospital and the doctor kind of like calls me and my dad into the hospital room and they're like, yeah, she's got cancer, it's terminal. And my dad's like, what are we talking, like months? And they were like, no, like days. I remember come out, we walked down the corridor to her room where she'd been given this really big special room, and my dad was like, he just turned to me, he was like, we say nothing, we just carry on, like nothing, like don't mention it. And we walk in and my dad's like, wow, they've given you the presidential suite, look at this. And we just kind of went into like strength mode, resilient mode. But then she basically, for the next week again, it was just like the morphine goes up, she slowly disappears. I remember doing all weird things. Like, I remember holding her hand and being like, oh, I never want to forget what your hand looks like. It was really weird. I was just like, I want to remember your hand, because she couldn't speak by that point. And yeah, and then we were waiting every night for the phone call, and then we just got a phone call saying she passed away. So that was when I was 14. But then my dad, like, wasn't a Christian, had a belief in God, and like really we used to talk about the Bible and Jesus and all that stuff, but it devastated him. My parents have been together since they were like 17, 18. Like he went into quite like bad depression, struggled. I kind of lost my dad in that moment, really. It took a while, but he kind of faded away in a different way. Struggled how to parent. I remember being at school, he'd unplug the phone lines. I don't know why, but I'd be stuck at school and be trying to ring to get a lift home, and he'd unplug them. He didn't have the capacity to be a dad. He was so consumed by his grief, and that actually didn't leave any room for my grief. So I remember being 16, I was like working at Pizza Hut, trying to earn enough money for my like my art book at my A levels. I was signing up for like this special like house like benefit, like job benefit, all like I was trying to do all the finances, trying to cook, trying to clean, and my dad was like just gone with depression, to the point where our relationship like completely broke down. Which again is just like grief. I think without God, grief can be all consuming, and there's not a huge amount of hope. But there's a verse that talks about like we're not those who grieve without hope. And I think already I started to like wrestle with God a lot, of like, okay, God, what the heck, are you real? Was my biggest question. And the peace thing is so funny, because I actually bizarrely started to feel like and experience God's presence in like the most like there's a verse that talks about the peace of the Lord like being beyond understanding. Like it basically makes no sense. That's how you know it's God's peace, because you're in the middle of an absolute mess and actually you're feeling peace. And I felt that at the hospital. I remember being sat on the hospital window being like, I feel a peace. I remember being in the car driving and feeling a peace. I remember being at the funeral feeling a peace. I remember being in the garden like and just feeling a peace. And initially I was like, I'm done with church, I'm done with this, like I'm out. And I remember doing this little thing in my head where I was like imagining if my life group leader said, but can you deny God exists? I remember thinking, no, I can't deny God exists, because I felt him. I've known him with me. It hasn't made the emotions any less. Like any idea of like Christianity or having a relationship with God taking away your emotions is wrong. If anything, being a Christian makes you more human. Jesus was like fully human, which means I think my faith helped me to grieve fully in a way that I think my dad kind of got stuck and wasn't able to process. I'd say my faith forced me to like process and feel and walk through questions and disappointment and like reflect on life and who God is. And so I basically ended up in this really like wrestle with God of being like, okay. And also there was a part of me that was like, I just want to go out, get drunk, smoke weed, have a jolly, like I'm done. And I was like, now's a great chance for me to just be like, bye church. I was gonna, but I felt this tug of being like, I felt the Lord saying like, can you deny I exist? And I was like, I can't. So I was like, well, I've got to fix my relationship with God then. And worship had been really special for me. Like I'd really connected with God in worship. That's how I'd felt him. And suddenly I remember being at church and just being like, I can't worship you, God. I feel like I'm giving you a round of applause.
Wow.
Like going, thank you, God, for not answering my prayers. Like I didn't think God had made it happen, but I knew he could have stopped it.
Yeah.
And I was like, and you didn't stop this. So if we're going to be friends, this is an issue.
Yeah.
We're going to have to talk about this. And I know I'm going on a lot. You can cut all this out. But I remember being at home and just being like, God, I can't have a relationship with you because I can't worship, and this is over. Like, it's like, I don't know, trying to have a boyfriend, not being able to go for dinner. It's like, good luck ever. If you can't ever eat together, how's it going to work? And then I felt the Lord said to me, Revelation chapter 7. I was like, what? Never read the book of Revelation. I thought it was some sort of Star Wars, like absolute apocalyptic. I was like, what is... So I remember grabbing my Bible, and the pages of Revelation were stuck together in my like youth Bible. So I peeled them open because I'd never read it, and I was like, what is this going to be? Like, Revelation 7. And it's this picture of 144,000 people, and it says they're all dressed in white, and they're worshipping Jesus, they're worshipping God. And one guy says to another, who are these? And he said that they are those who've gone through great trials and great tribulations and great suffering. But now they worship Jesus. He's like washed them clean. He's robed them.
Wow.
And I felt like God said to me, like, you may not be able to worship me now, but there'll come a day when you can. And I just kept reading it, and it said, basically, never again will the sun beat down upon them. Never again will harm come to them. And it's this picture in Revelation, is this picture of how the world will be.
Yeah.
No cancer, no sickness, no suffering, no depression. And I just started to cry, and then it just said, and God will wipe away every single one of their tears. And I was like, well, you better get ready to catch this. I was like, absolutely. Like I was sobbing. And I remember just being on my bed being like, I have so many questions still, but for whatever reason, God is being annoyingly present. And if he can speak to me like this, which felt so that was probably the most defining moment in my life. Because I think if I hadn't have heard God like that, I definitely wouldn't be a Christian, and I would have hit the absolute self-destruct button.
Wow.
I know I would have.
Wow.
The amount of moments of like when you've not got present parents, of like isolation, feeling horrendous. I used to have like suicidal thoughts quite often. I was like, if I hadn't have had that relationship with God and knowing him as like mother, father, I don't think I would be sat here today. I mean that very seriously.
Wow.
And so then it was like, okay, a journey of like figuring out, okay, what's this going to look like then, Lord? And as I say, it doesn't get rid of the emotions, but it leads you to a place of like processing them. And the peace isn't the absence of other stuff. It's not the absence of grief.
No.
Peace isn't the absence of pain. Peace isn't the absence of questions. Peace is Jesus Christ himself sitting with you like this, in it, in whatever it is. And so I'd say, I'm so grateful to have known that. And then I had a few years ago, 4 years ago, my dad then got cancer and died of it as well, but that's maybe another story.
Well,
just quickly, that was chapter 1. There's a whole other chapter. But anyway,
that's really powerful. You two both live very, very full lives. I feel like you've got kids, you've got a husband. You, Amy, are always joyful, dancing around.
Always joyful.
She's a real dancer, and bringing so much light everywhere you go. And there's probably so many people out there who are right now going through losing parents, going through, like, I remember I became a shell of myself when my granddad died, which is crazy because that's not even like my mum or dad. And so for girls out there who are like, how do I keep going? How do I not feel guilty for living a life even though they're not here? Like, there's that thing of, I remember when my granddad died, just thinking, how are people still driving their cars and how are people still eating their lunch and getting dressed when he's not here? And so what do you say to people who are watching this and they're like, how do I live fully? How do I keep going? How do I not feel guilty? How do I not get mad at people for still ordering stuff on Amazon when someone's died?
That's a great question.
I think that's where, for me, I think the way that I grieved was maybe different to you, Emily, and that is like, wow, that is so painful, because like, I think for me, my natural instinct is to go, okay, I need to get on with it. I need to go. I need to keep moving forward. But that's that reality of that. It's grief can be a really hindering thing. It's like, this has happened. How are we still moving forward? And for me, I just feel like grief is such an expression of life, of love. It's almost like the receipts of a life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the receipts of the love that you had between someone. It's those, and so obviously it's always going to look different. For me, Mum was like literally at my dad's funeral. We played the song "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life" from Monty Python. That's a good song. So like I was always like, okay, we've just got to keep going, just got to keep going, just got to keep going. Yeah. But for those that for people that feel like that, it's like, I guess that piece that you're talking about is. It's so real, and it's okay to feel like that, to have that time of just, all right, I'm feeling that like this right now. If I don't want to eat, if I just want to be in bed for a few weeks, and that's okay. But also to have those friends around you that will.
I think as well, there is a grief cycle. That you have to go through. And if you don't go through it, you get stuck. Yeah. And there's like all the stages, you can like Google it, there's like all these stages that we go through of like denial and shock and anger and like and hopelessness and despair. But if you go through it, you begin to come out the other side. If you don't go through it, it wreaks havoc in your life because you've not processed it. Like, and I think in the immediate moment after someone has died, there is like just the shock, and I completely resonate with how you feel. Like, how are people carrying on? And I think other cultures do this better than we do in the West. Like, one of my friends passed away. He was my age, and his funeral was in Africa, and they grieved and wailed. They dressed in black. They didn't leave their house for 2 weeks. Wow. And they screamed and cried and grieved. And that to us can seem like quite extreme. Yeah. But it's actually, when you lose someone, that's actually normal. Yeah. That's more normal than me putting on makeup and trying to carry on my life the next day. And I think we don't know how to grieve here. I think in this country, we've lost, we kind of, even like we kind of keep the body over there and we do that, and we kind of, it's happened and we're all wearing black, and then we just back to it. But I actually think there's a moment to just scream, to wail, to cry, to be like, what the heck is going on? But you come through it. And I'd say if anyone's in like an intense stage of grief, like it moves, it shifts, you do come through it, but you have to like go through it. There's a book I read to my daughter Florrie, 6 years old, called We're Going on a Bear Hunt. And if anyone knows this, we're going on a bear hunt, we're going to find a big one. I'm not scared. And then it's like, oh no, grass. Long, wavy grass. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. We've got to go through it. Hashtag grief. Yeah. Like, you can't, when you lose someone, you can't go over it. You can't go under it. You have to go through it. And that is true of whatever loss we experience in life. Not just like, parents is a pretty extreme form. But there's when you lose a job, there's the end of a relationship, there's when life just changes and you've moved city, and you're like, just when you suddenly go, oh my gosh, my life is changing, it's like, you have to experience the negative emotions in order for that to be like life at the end. Like manure, but the stuff life throws at us, that stuff, that can become the most fertile ground if it's had the process. And all the mess in life, I think, can become some of the richest soil. I would say I am in part who I am today, and I feel like I have the capacity to enjoy and savor life and savor my children and savor simple things like food or the sand between your toes or like a sunset. I feel like I have quite a good capacity for that. Probably, I think, because I've experienced a lot of the mess, that when life is okay and I'm like, oh, I'm healthy and life's okay, I'm like, oh, my heart is so full. But I don't think it would be like that if I hadn't have probably processed and really allowed the stuff to sink.
That's so true. And on that as well, like for me as well, as someone, as at 11 I went into full denial mode for like and it was like for I think 3 years that I genuinely like, even if someone like started talking about like parents and like I was like, oh no, they don't know about like what my situation, like I might have to explain it to them. I'd almost like have a panic attack. Like I was so scared. And it wasn't until I was 14 when I had to tell my story in front of my whole class.
Wow.
And I mean, all of my friends knew my story anyway because they'd walked it, but I had to tell her, and it wasn't until that moment that I began my grief journey. It actually took me a really long time, and it's funny that because it's from that moment at 14 years old that when I started to really follow Jesus as well, from when I started to develop those kind of trusting relationships with the people, with some youth pastors that God put in my life to love me, and it's so true. And I think from 14 and even this year has been one of those years where the thorn in my flesh is just like I've moved and I can feel it so much. This year has definitely been one, and these past 6 months I've been processing all again, but it is that so true about the fact of you processing through things. At the end of it, you feel like you can breathe. You're like, oh my gosh. You have more empathy for people. You have more capacity. You can see yourself in the reality of, I guess, what the gospel is as well. With your, going through it, is like if Jesus didn't take all those steps from the Garden of Gethsemane all the way to when he's on the cross, it is finished. He's breathed his last breath. And then the resurrection 3 days later. I think your grief, by processing it through, is that you see it in its context of, okay, that happened to me, but this is why it's made me stronger. I can understand now that there is a hope at the end of it. There's a hope, and I think that's for me as well. Going through things, it puts things back into their reality of what it is, the reality of your friendships, the reality of your relationships, the way you view life, the way you view God. Puts things into perspective. If that makes sense.
And I find that. Yeah, and I definitely think sometimes we can have a view of especially being a Christian, experiencing bad things is there's a wound and God heals the wound and it's like it never happened. That is not what happens.
Yeah.
Even I think it's amazing. Jesus' resurrection, Jesus dies. One, there's so much I found of, oh my gosh, I serve a God and I love a God and I know a God who has experienced death and suffering. That is not a million miles away from God's experience. That was one of the things I was like, no one understands what I'm going through. Even if you've had the same experience, it's going to be different. No one understands what I've gone through, but God. God really knows what I'm going through. But we can think, oh, he's just going to heal us. But Jesus comes away from the cross and he still has scars.
Yeah.
They're healed, but there's still scars. And I remember having this picture of I was talking to my therapist after my dad died because I was like, this is just brought up. I'm like, is this a sick joke that 2 for 2, you're just like, this is not okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, I feel like there's just this massive crater of devastation in my life, and there's not room for anything else. This is my whole life is this is it, just it's been destroyed again.
Yeah.
And she was saying about how it's not like the crater gets filled in, but it's your life gets bigger around it. So I would say the loss of my mum and my dad is not getting smaller.
Okay. Yeah.
It's always there. But my life around it has been able to grow and get bigger.
Wow.
And I think it's important to know that, because otherwise you can be naive and it can really catch you off guard. I remember getting married and suddenly it's there's a whole new moment to grieve. I grieved being a 15-year-old and not having my mum, but I had to grieve getting married, not having my mum, having my first child, grieving her not being there. There's all these moments where it's a fresh layer of grief. It's I'm in the crater and it's oh wow, I've not seen that part of this loss.
Can't wait for that, Rach.
But what it also is, and this is what you were saying earlier, is grief is the price you pay for love.
Yeah.
And I would rather have this massive grief in my life because of how much I loved my mum and I loved my dad and how much they meant to me. If I didn't grieve, someone might have passed away today, someone over there, the Lord bless them, I don't know them, that's probably not affecting me. If it affects you, it's a sign of the impact someone made on you. It's a sign of their presence in your life. And for me, my mum and my dad had the most amazing presence. It's taught me so much. I'm actually, that's the price I'm going to pay. Like you said, the receipt is that's the price I pay for having loved and for them having loved me. I'm happy to pay that. And there is a possibility, I think, when you go through that and accept this is part of my life, it's not ever gonna be completely easy, but wow, I feel like I can be bigger and my life can be fuller around the edges, like, yeah, of the things that then come in. I'm like, wow, look at the life over here, and I'm so much more grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, as we close up, do you guys have some advice for a girl whose parents aren't gone yet, but they're going through a family member being sick, or they're seeing a friend or a family member dying, and that's a struggle, because both of you have watched a parent go through that, and so do you have any advice for them?
For me, journaling became so important as part of my like process, talking about the rubbish in life. If you process it, it can become manure, which is super fertile. Journaling, reading the Bible, and like prayer walking, for me, were like so key to my process. And that's part of like naming the horror of what you're seeing. Honestly, like me sharing like some of the traumatic moments is kind of like therapy for me, because you're processing it. I'm like, wow, actually I play that back to myself. This is awful. This was horrendous. This is shocking. And I think sometimes temptation is we don't talk about it. We don't talk about how horrendous cancer is and how awful, like we just cover it and we put it over there and go, oh, I don't want to talk. And talking about it and finding safe places, finding safe people where you can just be honest and start sharing about the shocking things you're seeing, I think is part of processing. And if you're a friend, like just being listen and be open, and like just make space. You don't have to have any answers. You don't need to give advice. You like just listen and love and pray. Like create space for someone else's grief. Don't try and solve it, put a plaster on it. There's no plaster big enough. You're not going to do that. It's offensive if you try. Just make space and like listen. And like I would also say, if you have a friend who's lost a parent or a close family member, ask them about them. It was years before I remember saying my mum's name and someone asking, what was your mum's name, what was she like? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to like honor her memory.
I know people tend to walk around it, and people are like, oh, I don't want to step on your toes. Like, no, I used to like, I remember I always loved talking about my mum. Ask me questions about my mum. I will tell you everything, because who I am is because of who she was, right? And it's like who you're seeing of me is because of who she was, the life that she gave me as well. And I think that's exactly right, asking questions. And I mean, I know people grieve so differently, and some people are shut off, and so meet people where they're at. I think it's it's just so important to have that kind of awareness and not being oblivious to the other people's pain, or even the way that people process as well. Because some people, they might not want to talk and they just want to go bowling and be distracted, and that might be a thing. And that's, for me, that's what I needed. I remember the same day that my mum passed away, one of my friends, like my older friends, she took me to Toys R Us, and we rode around on unicorn bikes, and that was the same day that my mum passed away, and that's what I needed that day. And it's like, being that kind of friend for someone is so important, what they need, where they are. And I think that's exactly, when Jesus says, like, if you feed this person, like, you're feeding me, it's like you doing that for someone, like, that's not unnoticed in the kingdom of heaven at all.
It's really good. It's really
powerful. Thank you, girls. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Sorry I cried, everyone.
I didn't cry.
Rule 1, tears are allowed.
We've
got to normalize crying.
I couldn't cry for
When we're
years.
sad.
I couldn't cry for years. I can cry all the time now, except for today, apparently.
Tears are
You don't
great.
need to force it.
Tears, I love crying. It's like,
Tears are emotions leaving the body. Tears are good.
Healthy.
Inside Out 3.
Oh, I love Inside Out. I watched Inside Out with you.
Yeah, we watched it together.
With Adele, our friend who left us to go to America.
Adele.
We miss you,
Makes
Adele.
me sad.
Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you guys for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
If you guys have any questions, DM us at Ribs and It's Podcast, and we'll be sure to respond, I'm sure. And thanks Thanks, guys. Sharing your hearts, sharing your stories. And yeah, reach out to someone if you're struggling. Love you. Bye.
Love you.